morning. This is Jay Rovert, founder and director of the R&B Group, and I can't wait to get this production on. Have a fascinating guest, Michelle Schapp, one of the leading authorities in the field of cybersecurity in the legal field. Michelle, so happy you got up early in the morning preparing for this. Please introduce yourself. Say hello.
Jay, thank you so much for having me today. Michelle Schapp here. I'm actually in my office today at Chiesa, Shahinian, and Giantomasi, and delighted to join you.
I'm having a little difficulty pronouncing your current firm's name and the segue into the construction business.
You and everybody else, which is why I often tell people to say CSG, but the firm name is Chiesa, Shahinian, and Giantomasi. Jeff Chiesa used to be with the Christie administration here in New Jersey, finished out Lautenberg's term in the Senate, and then we were fortunate enough to have him join our firm when he left the Senate and left the Christie administration. Armin Shahinian, for those of you who know surety law, is one of the leading practitioners in that field. And Frank Giantomasi is a force of nature. He is an incredible real estate attorney and an incredible partner to practice with.
It's so much fun having this interview with Michelle Schapp, who we both know we're connected by her uncle's last name, Phil Schapp, because obviously by looking at my background, I'm the jazz man. Michelle, say a couple words.
Jay, thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad that you shared with the audience Phil. Phil is my dynamic, amazing cousin who eats, sleeps, and breathes jazz.
Yes.
And I will tell you, one of my favorite stories about Phil was actually about his father, my uncle Walter, who got Phil into jazz in the first place. And Walter grew up in the 40s with jazz and all that meant, including being in France during the war with the big names in jazz back then. And when my uncle Walter passed away, cousin Phil arranged for an amazing Louisiana-style funeral down at St. Peter's in New York. And for any of you who know what St. Peter's Church is in New York, it is the jazz church. Yeah. And as I was driving into the city to my uncle Walter's funeral, I called a friend of mine who I knew loved my cousin Phil and loved his show. And I said, Jerry, I know this sounds really strange, but I'm calling to invite you to a funeral. And he said, you're right, Michelle, that sounds really strange. I said, my uncle Walter died and Wynton Marsalis is playing the funeral. And it was incredible. And Phil's homage to his father and to jazz was amazing. And Phil's amazing. And I hope you all enjoy him on KCR.
Oh, I certainly do. And I hope others do too. Michelle, at a young age, I believe that you knew you could fit in with the man's world. You were a little ahead of the times. Tell us a couple brief notes about your childhood and then schooling, and then how all of a sudden you were living in Japan and really got a view of the world that most people don't have at such a young age.
Well, let's start with 8th grade without going too far back in childhood. Yep. And in 8th grade, we had a trial in our class where we were dealing with Patty Hearst and F. Lee Bailey, for those of us who are old enough to remember the Patty Hearst case. Yeah. And as my friend and I used to tell the story, had she hired us instead of F. Lee Bailey, she would have gotten off scot-free. But by 8th grade, I knew I'd given up on veterinary school. I had given up on any other career. I was going to be an attorney. Yep. That was my plan. And I will tell you, from 8th grade on, I never wavered from that.
So lucky. Very, very lucky. Mr. Pisces over here was wandering all over the lot. And tell us a little bit about school and more importantly about Japan and how you found yourself over there and got such a big view of the world per se that most people don't have.
Well, it's interesting. I went to, and I refer to it lovingly as Camp Cornell, where I played for 4 years and actually didn't really knuckle down to study until I went to law school. Yeah. And even though we didn't have the expression FOMO back then, I didn't take the opportunity to travel abroad when I was in college because I didn't want to miss out on what was going on campus. Right. And I will tell you, for anybody who's listening to this who might be in school right now, if you have the opportunity to go overseas, please take it. Yeah. Don't worry about what's going on campus. because I will tell you, living overseas in Japan and being able to travel internationally gave me such a broader perspective on the world that had I stayed in my cocoon here in the Northeast, I never would have experienced.
Sure, sure. Well, tell us about a couple of your early experiences in business in the legal field, and how somebody as feminine as yourself got involved in the field of construction.
Well, my legal career has not been the normal straight and narrow path. So I started out at Big Law in New Jersey. I was doing land use and banking work, and I enjoyed it enormously, particularly the land use work. But then we had an opportunity to go overseas, and we didn't have kids at that point. We hadn't bought a house yet.
Yeah.
And we said, why not? So we picked up and moved to Tokyo, lived there for 2 years. And what was wonderful is that I did everything. If it
Sure.
was in English, it was on my desk. So I was dealing with bank deals. I was dealing with the leasing of aircraft. I was dealing with M&A transactions, bond transactions.
How is it like to be a woman in Japan in that era?
I will tell you, Jay, back in the late 80s and early 90s, there were not many working, married, pregnant women in Tokyo. I was the talking dog. I was the anomaly that nobody knew what to make of. And particularly when I became pregnant and I was still working. And I will tell you, to my firm's credit, it was an unusual place to work. I worked at a firm that was then called Hamada Matsumoto. And when I found out that I was pregnant, I actually went into Hamada Sensei's office to share with him the news. And he said to me, Schaap-san, when will you be leaving us? And I said, Hamada Sensei, I don't know what the practice is here, but I really don't see myself sitting at home waiting to give birth. And he said, I believe that about you. And they allowed me to continue working. And it was very interesting to see how people responded to me, both in meetings and just commuting, because I was this anomaly. I was a married woman in Japan, pregnant, whose brain didn't stop functioning. And it was a wonderful experience. And I think that because my firm was such an exceptional firm, it allowed it to be that. Had I been at a different firm or not working, I think the experience would have been very different.
And then along came the 90s, and along came technology, and all of a sudden you made a turn and you got into the most important field today.
Well, actually, Jay, you missed one step, and that is that in the 90s, I was in-house counsel at Toys R Us.
Yes.
And that's when I got into construction. And I will tell you that back then, Toys R Us was building stores right and left.
Yeah.
And I learned construction law trial by fire. I was working with the architects, I was working with the engineers, I was working with the guys with the boots on the ground and walking construction sites back in the 90s when you didn't see a whole lot of women on construction sites.
A female in the construction industry, and we could let our imaginations run wild. Speak to that.
You know, it's funny, Jay, I feel like we have this recurring theme here, and that is that I'm not fitting into the mold that people might want to establish for me. And I kind of like the fact that I'm a little bit anomalous, and I can live with that. So in terms of whether it was practicing in Japan or practicing here back in the States when I was in-house counsel at Toys R Us, the construction field is something that I can point to and say, I made that building happen. I made that Ferris wheel get constructed. I did the ski slope at American Dream. I did the construction contracts for not only the ski slope, but the snowmaking machine. And it's a field that is still not where you see a lot of women. And because of that, we're often underestimated. And I will tell you, I take full advantage of the fact that men make the mistake only once of underestimating me as a construction attorney.
Not by me. And then somewhere along the line, you discovered the area of technology. Why don't you give a segue of what happened in between and where you went?
Well, it's interesting because Toys R Us in the late 90s started to discover this e-commerce thing.
Yep.
And nobody quite knew what to make of it. And in fact, Yahoo was just getting started back then. And Yahoo saw Toys R Us as an opportunity for it to launch itself into
Sure,
e-commerce.
sure.
And that was the first agreement that I actually negotiated in that arena. And nobody quite knew what it meant or what it looked like or how it would feel. And as more of my clients started to get interested, and I went back into private practice at that point as well, dealing with more and more clients who said, you know, we want to get onto this internet thing and we want to sell things online. And well, we cut and paste the privacy policy in terms of use from Amazon.com. That's okay, right?
Yes.
And I said to my clients as politely as I could, well, aside from the fact that that's plagiarism, I'm fairly confident that you don't have the technology behind your sites that Amazon has.
Yep.
So let's look into what you've got and what you're saying before you put yourself out there.
Sure. And
That,
then,
I'm sorry, please.
and then,
Well, and then I actually convinced my firm to send me back to school. And I went back to school for cybersecurity and data protection. I've actually gone back to school now for 3 different degrees or certifications in this arena. I'm actually looking into a potential 4th as well, because I will tell you, in this field, it is growing so fast and the bad guys are so far ahead of everybody else. There's always something new. There's always a new thing to be concerned about. And I hate telling my clients, I told you so. I much prefer to be proactive with my clients, getting them ahead of the curve as much as possible, whether it's from a legal standpoint, whether it's from a contractual standpoint, or just what's doing the right thing to protect the keys to the kingdom.
well, this is a very interesting story going forward. And somewhere along the line, you started getting your certificates and really taking this really, really seriously. And how did your firm evolve when they knew you were going at this at an early stage? How did your firm feel? Were they helpful in this area? Or they think this is a spectacular area for you to get into?
Actually, I have to tell you, Chiesa has been amazing. They have supported me as I expanded my knowledge base, first in construction, actually. And I indicated back in the late 2000s, I wanted to go back because I was tired of construction guys looking at me and saying, A, I'm a woman, and B, I'm a lawyer. So what can I possibly know about construction? And I went back to school at NJIT and got my construction project management certification.
Yep.
But then as I started getting more into cyber, I went back to the firm and I said, guys, I know enough to be dangerous. I want to know enough to counsel clients here in a meaningful way. And so did some research with our law librarian. And at the time, there was only one ABA certified program, which was offered by a law school out in the Midwest, Mitchell Hamlin School of Law. And I went back and got my certification in cybersecurity and privacy. And from there, I've gone back to school now through Harvard. I've gone back to school through the IAPP. And as I said, I'm looking for now what's my next certification. But the firm has been enormously supportive of my practice, not only in supporting clients, but in supporting the firm as well.
Interesting, interesting. And so what do you see today in your field? How is it today? You know, the projects you're working on, the fields of interest that you're learning more about. Tell us about your view today, technology and crime and everything that's going on. Give us your perspective.
You cannot read the paper, you cannot listen to a news report without some headline: ransomware, hacking, business email compromise, miswired funds. It's in the news every single day. Sometimes it's nation state actors or nation sponsored actors, and sometimes it's just organized crime that's realized it's much cheaper and much more effective to send a ransomware than to go and break somebody's legs.
Look
Much
at
more
Putin.
effective.
Yeah, look at Putin today. He's totally turning us upside down.
Yes, he is. And we've got to be prepared for that. And I will say that this administration, without getting political, has put out there an executive order saying we need to take this seriously as a country, and leading from the top, leading from the White House, and saying we need to really have cyber measures in place. We need to have meaningful information sharing, which is going on in a handful of industries.
Sure.
The financial industry, I have to say, is the best in terms of sharing threat information. Healthcare is starting to get there, but as a general proposition, people aren't sharing this intel because they don't want people to find out, "Oh, I've been breached." Well, guess what? Everybody's been breached and they just may not know it yet.
Yes. Michelle, there's another side of your life. You're actually a human being who cares about world issues. There's something very, very close to your heart. Take a couple of minutes and speak about it. In terms of it was a hobby, but now it's turned into something that's really helping mankind. Please tell us, take a few minutes and talk about it.
We are a family of skiers and snowboarders and snowshoers. And you're right, this started out as family fun on the weekends. And as our kids got older and needed less of our hands-on, I started teaching the general public after I learned myself how to snowboard with some confidence and comfort. And then I saw on the mountain a whole bunch of folks wearing green coats. And I said to one of my friends, "What are they doing?" And they said, "Oh, they're teaching people with special needs." I thought, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I approached the director of the program and I said, "So how do I get involved with this?" And she said, "You want to volunteer? We are looking for bodies, particularly for snowboard instructors."
Yeah.
So for the last 8 years, I have been teaching snowboarding, and I've also supported the ski program as well for people with challenges. And those challenges range from developmental issues to paraplegics to quadriplegics, MS, CP, autism spectrum, veterans, fill in the blank. If you've got an issue and you want to be on the mountain, we're going to figure out how you can do that. And there's programs at a couple of different mountains around the country. The one that I volunteer for is the Adaptive Sports Foundation in Windham, New York. And I will tell you, lawyering, I love to do intellectually. Teaching snowboarding to people with these challenges saves my soul.
That's why I love the personal sides to these interviews. I know people get a little impatient with me, but I just love the personal side of who you really are. In closing, Michelle, why don't you take 30 seconds to 60 seconds? What is the most important couple of things that we should know in closing about Michelle Schaap?
Michelle Schaap is passionate about what she is doing, whether it's cybersecurity, construction, teaching snowboarding, or spending time with my family. I am committed to what I jump into. And I will tell you, I love counseling my clients. I hate saying "I told you so." And if I can help people, whether it's in business or in their lives, that's what I enjoy doing.
And for the audience to know, you've heard about Michelle and all her talents. And I can say in the brief time I've known her this year, she cares. She's a team player within our group. She's always trying to help other people. We'll take time out and all of a sudden ignore other things if she can make a difference in somebody else's life. She certainly has made a big difference in mine. So thrilled to have you be part of this group and be so enthusiastic about it and being my friend. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Jay.